Hello everyone. So one of my customers contacted me, told me that they were going to buy their first AR-15, and they were interested in getting something called a Mark 12. Okay, and the reason why they were thinking of getting this is they heard on the internet that the Mark 12 is responsible for more combat deaths than any other precision rifle, right? So it must be like a really badass rifle. So in this video, we're going to explore what it is and why. Okay, so Mark 12, first of all, there was 3 versions of that. Okay, and if you've heard the term Recce rifle, basically that's the Navy SEAL version of the Mark 12. And if you've heard Mark 18, that's basically the short barrel version, okay, of the Mark 12. Okay, so going back to 2001, 2002, the early days of the war on terror, right? Iraq and Afghanistan. They basically had M4s, right? Most of them just iron sights. In some cases, maybe they had like ACOGs that had like a 3.5 magnification. So the first thing they thought of doing was a free floating the rail. Okay, so with these handguards, right? What's happening is the front sight post here is attached to the barrel, and the front of the handguard is attached to the barrel. So theoretically, that basically interferes with the barrel's natural flex. Okay, and interferes with the barrel's harmonics. So the idea that they came up with was that if they free float the rail, meaning that it's attached directly to the upper receiver in the back here, right? Doesn't touch the barrel up front here, the barrel is going to naturally flex, okay? And they're going to get an improved accuracy. And I've tested numerous traditional plastic handguard type M4s against other ARs, right, that have free-floating barrels. With match ammunition, we're talking about maybe a half MOA, okay? A lot of times they come out about the same. So you got to do a lot of shooting with match ammunition, and you'll see that, hey, yeah, maybe the free-floating rail gives you about a half MOA improvement. This Palmetto right here, with match ammunition, it gets 1 inch at 100 yards, okay? So, it's not uncommon today with match ammunition to get 1 inch at 100 yards. So so that's the first component of this Mark 12. It's got a free floating rail, okay, which is a very standard thing today. Basically, if you go to buy an AR, right, you're probably going to be getting one with a free floating rail. To get one with a plastic handguard, that's kind of like the exception today. So we look at this and we call this old school or traditional, right? Antique. Okay. So pretty much almost any AR that you get is going to have a free floating rail. Okay. So everyone, I want to add something on these early Mark 12 rails, right? These free floating rails. They were round and they were fat. Okay. And this is before M-LOK was invented. So it had Picatinny across the top, right? But then it also had like usually a short, Picatinny section here, short section here. I'm not sure what they had on the bottom. I'm not sure how they attached the bipods and the, in some cases, the vertical grips. But the main thing I just want to make you guys aware that the rails are a lot fatter than what is common today. And me personally, I don't like the fat rails. Okay, that's why I kind of have a cheap scope on this, because it's not a rifle I use that much because I don't like the rail that much. Okay, so just be aware that they got these big fat rails. I guess a benefit to having this is that it because it's further away from the barrel, it doesn't heat up as fast. And it does dissipate the heat a little bit faster when it does get hot. But for the most part, I pretty much prefer the slimmer rails. Now that's me. And also I like having M-LOKs, places where I can attach stuff to the rail wherever I want. Okay, so that's going to be one of the limitations of getting a clone correct Mark 12 rail. Okay, it doesn't have M-lock, and it's going to be a lot bigger and fatter, also heavier, right? Because it's fatter, so there's going to be more material there. Okay, so that's number 5. Because what I'm doing is I'm starting from the bottom and I'm going up in what I consider like least important to most important as far as having a super, having a precision AR-15. Okay, so number 5, bottom of the list, free floating rail, and like I said, the reason is because I've tested it. I got a number of ARs. I got Palmetto, I got Smith & Wesson, I got Colt. With match ammunition, they're all going to get 1 inch at 100 yards. Okay, and I've also shot other name brands, not just name brands, but like budget economy ones. It's not that hard to get 1 inch at 100 yards. So number 4 on this list, right? What they did is the M4s had 14.5-inch barrels, and basically the goal here was not just to shoot accurately, right? They wanted to get out to distance. So the M4s were getting good combat accurate hits out to 500 yards, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to extend that to out to about 800 yards. Okay, so they wanted to be 600, 700, 800 yards. They wanted to add another 300 yards to that capability, and what they thought to do was get a longer barrel. Okay, so basically 18-inch barrel. So we got an 18-inch free floated 18-inch barrel on a free floated rail. So that was the first version of the Mark 12 had that 18-inch barrel, and then it had a fixed stock, right? The stock in the back was fixed. In the second version, what they did is they went to the collapsible stock, okay? And in the third version, they cut the barrel from 18 inches to 16 inches, okay? And the reason for that is because they found that, hey, you know what? That extra 2 inches really didn't make that much of a difference. They could still get out to 800 yards. And the reason for this is, I did a separate video on this. When we look at when bullets go transonic, in an 11.5 inch, like I got right here, in the 11.5 inch, the bullet is still supersonic out to 800 yards, right? A 55 grain, 62 grain, even the 77 grain. I mean, it just, it starts getting transonic at 800 yards. Okay, with a 16-inch barrel, it doesn't get, it doesn't get transonic until you're at 950 yards. Okay, and the 18-inch is basically supersonic to 1,000 yards. Okay, so by going from 18 inches to down, cutting it down to 16 inches, they're still supersonic out to the 800 yards, where which is their goal, which is where they want to be at. So they said, okay, it doesn't make sense to have that extra length, especially if you're trying to put a suppressor on the end. So they cut it from 18 inches to 16 inches. Okay, so far we've got a free floating rail in either an 18-inch or 16-inch AR, right? With collapsible stock or with fixed stock, depending on which version you're trying to imitate. Okay, I basically I mentioned earlier, if you ever hear the term Recce rifle, that's the Navy SEAL version. If you ever hear the term Mark 18, that's the short barrel version, right? Or the pistol version. So 11.5 inches here, that's basically your Mark 18. And the reason why even the 11.5 inch is still viable for a precision rifle is because the 11.5 inch is still supersonic out to about 800 yards. So that that puts them, that meets their goal basically. Okay? So number 3 on this list, right? Suppressor. Okay, so on this one over here, I have some type of sound reduction device. So this isn't an actual suppressor, but it works pretty damn good, right? This is the Radical Firearms linear compensator. It reduces the sound enough that I can comfortably shoot it with just the little ear cushions, which with most, if I try to shoot 11.5 inch with just ear cushions, it hurts. Okay, I gotta actually use earmuffs. So the main benefit of the suppressor, right, because the bullet's still going supersonic, but so it's still going to make that crack. But here's the thing, that it reduces the noise, right, at the muzzle. So if somebody's like 500 to 800 yards downrange, okay, remember the bullet's going faster than the speed of sound, right? So when the bullet gets down there, what they're gonna hear the crack first, okay? They're gonna hear that sonic boom first, and then they're gonna hear the muzzle blast, right? That the noise from that is going to follow after, okay? So what I have found happens, right, which this is actually from being, going downrange, at like a 1,000-yard range that I go to, and hearing the bullets whiz by, the crack of the bullet is a lot louder than the muzzle blast that's like 500, 600 yards back. So it overwhelms it. So you hear the crack, you really, it overwhelms the crack of the muzzle, right? The blast of the muzzle. So it's hard to tell from exactly which direction it's coming from, right? So you hear the crack here, but you don't know if the muzzle blast came from there or there or there. So that's really how the suppressor works. It doesn't silence the gun sound, but you're just hearing the sound of the bullet here, which overwhelms wherever the muzzle is. Okay, so that's why this became an important component of this Mark 12. Okay. So far we got free floating rail, barrel, and that could be 16, 18 inches, 11.5 inches. They found that they all pretty much work pretty good. Okay, so now we're getting to the important stuff. Okay, the two important components. So number 2 on my list is the scope. Okay, the scope, because the M4s, right, they basically had either iron sights or they had like ACOGs on them. Or they had like aim point, which just a dot, but which is basically 1x. But they didn't have any real magnification any good magnification for shooting out to 500 to 800 yards. I mean, 3x. I mean, 3x is pretty good, getting you out to maybe 300 yards, 400 yards. But after that, like it's really hard to see your target, right? So. Initially, the scopes they really didn't have access to scopes, so a lot of guys were actually going into the civilian market and buying like hunting scopes, and eventually the military caught up and started procuring scopes for them. So most of these Mark 12s, again also Recce rifles and also Mark 18, they had either 3 to 9 scopes, or like 2.5 to 10 scopes. Okay, so they had variable scopes, and that we talked about all these other things before. I think that made a big difference. Okay, that was a big difference. Being able to see at distance, it increased the chance, especially in the desert where the bullets are impacting on sand and they're moving the sand. You can spot the impacts and you can make corrections. Okay, so having a magnification scope, that went out to 9 or 10 magnification, I think is a really important component here. And the interesting thing here is, like, if you go to any of these sites, right, and you buy, something that they call the Mark 12, right, it doesn't come with a scope, so you gotta go buy the scope separate. So you're paying extra for something that has this name, but like. So far, like free floating rail, that's the standard, right? Most of your ARs come with free floating rails. Barrel lengths of 18, 16 inches. I mean, that's standard, right? 16 inches is standard. 18 inches, you can easily get that if that's what you want. Okay. Suppressor, that's an NFA item, right? So that's not something you're gonna buy from the gun company. I mean, I guess they could sell it separate, but or you can get the linear comp like I got here. You want it to be you want it to have a cone, right? That kind of directs the blast. The cone kind of acts like a baffle, right? So you want it to have an internal cone, which this one has, which is why it works so good. There's a couple of companies that make a similar design. I don't recall them offhand, But that is, again, that's not necessarily something that comes with the gun. Okay, that's something that you got to get extra. Okay, so scope, you got to get that extra, right? That's something, and you got the options that we have available today are way better than the stuff they had available back then. Okay, so yeah, like they had these 3 to 9 scopes, 2.5 to 10 scopes, but today, like if you go to Primary Arms, you can get some really great scopes that have like ACSS that help you do really fast range estimating. So we've got much better options today. Okay. So lastly, right, and this is number 1 on my list. Okay, this is the most important factor of why the Mark 12, all right, supposedly got more combat kills than any other precision rifle. I'm guessing by that they meant precision AR-15. The most important component is better ammunition. Okay, up until that point, they had their M4s, and they're basically shooting the 62 grain 855 green tips, which basically, like I've got a bunch of those green tips. They, for the most part, they'll get like 3 MOA, 3 inches at 100 yards. If I shoot a lot of groups, sometimes I'll get lucky. I'll get some, I'll get some bullets that have some cartridges where they've been loaded consistently, right? The gunpowder's been loaded consistently, and maybe I'll get down closer to 2 MOA. But for the most part, the green tips, I'm getting about 3 MOA, 3.5 MOA. But if I take 77 grain match ammunition and throw it in any of these rifles here, okay, they're all going to get 1 inch at 100 yards, okay? And like this one over here, this Ruger MPR, it easily gets a 1/2 inch. I mean, not all the time, right? Because if you're trying to get a 1/2 inch group, things like wind, you're breathing, tiny little things can throw you off. But 1 inch, 100 yards, easy with this 18-inch Ruger MPR. It's got a Primary Arms PLX scope on here. So, it's got the bipod on here. So this is a good approximation of a Mark 12, right? Doesn't have the suppressor on there. But if this, I've done videos where I'm shooting this to 850 yards. Okay, if you search my channel name and just put 850 yards next to my channel name, you should find the video where I'm shooting 850 yards with that rifle there. Okay, and that's really the most important component here, the match grade ammunition. Okay, as far as somebody buying something that's labeled, commercially labeled a Mark 12, I mean, I think they're just charging you a lot more than they need to. They're just charging you extra for that label, because, like I said, I mean, most ARs today are free floated rails. 16 inches is the standard. You can get 18 inches if you want a little bit more velocity. The suppressor is an NFA item, right? So you're not getting that from the gun company. The scopes you buy separate, and I highly recommend the ACSS type reticles because they allow you to do quick range estimating off the size of a man, right? They've got they got a whole bunch of different scopes where within that they also have mill lines so that you can range estimate off of other things. They got mill grids in there, where you can use that to spot your impacts and do quick adjustments. So we got much better scope options today than they had available back then. Okay, and then lastly, 77 grade match ammunition. Again, you can buy that online. You throw that into any AR-15, and you pretty much are going to have you put a scope on that with 77 grain match ammunition. You got a precision rifle. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it makes sense to go and pay extra for something that they've labeled a Mark 12 because for the most part, it's either pretty standard to what we're using today with the free floated rails, or you gotta buy the extras separate anyway. Now, there's a lot of people that build clone correct like Mark 12s, okay? And and what they're trying to do there is, like, in many cases they actually served in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they used a specific rifle, and they're trying to rebuild the rifle that they used. Okay, so this is something personal to them, and in many cases they're trying to actually source the parts from the same company that originally made the parts that went into the gun that they were using when they were in service. Okay, so that kind of makes sense, right? If you're trying to build a clone of the gun that you were actually using, it makes sense to spend a whole bunch of money on that, all right? Because that's something really personal to you and your life experience. But especially for somebody that's new to AR-15s, it doesn't make sense to spend a whole bunch of money doing that. I mean, I'm gonna say, listen, just get yourself a budget AR-15 and get good at shooting that, man. Because you can get a cheap Palmetto or Bear Creek Arsenal or Smith & Wesson, any of these $500 AR-15s, and you put a scope on that, you put match ammunition on that, and you will, with enough practice and, watch a bunch of my videos where I talk about, precision shooting techniques, you will be able to shoot an inch at 100 yards, okay? So, something for you guys to think about, and again, this video is at, basically it's an answer to a question that I received from from one of my customers, right? And I kind of gave him the answer over the phone, but hey, I thought I'd actually pull out the rifles, show him some examples, and then hopefully this answers his question better. Okay, so drop some comments. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys disagree with me, by all means, drop it in the comments. I'm more than happy to hear different opinions. If there's something that you guys think I missed that is an important component to why the Mark 12 or Mark 18 or the Recce rifle was so successful, put it in the comment field. But my opinion is that the stuff that's available today, especially in the area of scopes, you can actually build a much better gun today than they had back then. Okay? So talk to you all soon.